The smell of engine oil and fresh paint hung thick in the air, as bright ceiling lights danced off polished chrome and glass. The Mercedes-Benz truck showroom was a temple of steel and ambition, all sharp edges, sleek finishes, and voices that spoke in confident tones. At the heart of this gleaming world, a quiet sound interrupted the rhythm, the soft scuff of worn-out boots on marble. Heads turned. Through the tall glass doors stepped an old man. His beard was long and white, his face creased like a map of hard roads. A torn cap shaded his tired eyes. His shirt was faded, his jacket frayed, his jeans carrying the stains of oil, dust, and time. Everything about him looked misplaced in the symmetry of wealth around him. The executives near the front desk paused mid-conversation. 3 women, Miranda Hale, the silver-haired manager, and her assistants Julia and Serena, exchanged quick glances. Miranda arched an eyebrow. "Can I help you, sir?" she asked, her voice polite but measured, like someone accustomed to fending off time-wasters. The old man didn't answer right away. His eyes scanned the room slowly, landing on the largest white truck at the far end, the crown jewel of the display. He walked toward it, each step echoing softly. The laughter that had filled the showroom just moments before now turned to whispers. When he reached the truck, he laid his rough hand on the chrome grille, his touch gentle, almost reverent. "She's a beauty," he murmured, voice gravelly but warm, like a man greeting an old friend. Then he looked up, straightened his back, and said clearly, "I'll take 5 of these." The words floated in the air like a joke told in the wrong room. Julia, the youngest of the 3 women, bit her lip to keep from laughing. The 2 mechanics nearby smirked openly. Miranda folded her arms. "Sir," she said after a pause, her tone calm but sharp, "these aren't bicycles. Each one of these trucks costs more than most people earn in a lifetime." "I know," he said simply, "and I'll take 5. The room rippled with suppressed amusement. Someone chuckled near the back. But the old man stood firm, his expression steady, not angry, not confused, just certain. "Before we continue, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and stories that remind us never to judge too quickly, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Corner. It helps more people see stories that move the heart." Back in the showroom, the laughter faded into an awkward silence. Something in the man's composure unsettled Miranda. There was no arrogance in his eyes, only quiet conviction. "Sir," she said finally, keeping her voice even, "perhaps you're in the wrong place. There's a used lot down the street." He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that didn't ask for understanding. "I'm in the right place," he said softly, "but maybe you're seeing the wrong man." He walked away, unbothered by the whispers that followed him. He poured himself a small paper cup of water from the machine in the corner and stood silently, as if thinking about something far away. No one noticed how steady his hands were, how familiar his movements looked around machinery. No one saw the quiet strength behind his stillness, the kind born of years of surviving what life threw his way. His name was Harold Brindley. Once, long ago, that name had meant something. He had been an engineer, a soldier, a husband, a father. But life had stripped him of almost everything. His wife, Clara, had died in a hospital he couldn't afford to keep her in. His small trucking company, his pride and his family's livelihood, had been crushed by corporate greed. In a single cruel year, he had gone from a respected business owner to a man with nothing but his backpack and memories. Still, Harold never gave up on the road. To him, the road was life, long, uncertain, but always leading somewhere. For 5 years, he worked quietly in the shadows, fixing broken-down rigs, patching engines under bridges, sleeping in workshops, and saving every cent he could. While others saw him as a washed-up drifter, Harold was building something in secret, a dream. He called it Second Route Logistics, a transport company that would give a second chance to those the world had written off. Veterans, single mothers, ex-convicts, the homeless, anyone willing to work hard for a new beginning. And today, that dream was about to begin. Miranda sighed and went back to her paperwork, convinced the old man was delusional. But when she looked up again, Harold was standing at the front desk, a small stack of documents in his hand. "Here's my purchase order," he said, his tone polite but firm. Miranda blinked. The papers were neatly bound, stamped, and signed. Julia leaned closer, curiosity replacing her amusement. The name printed at the top caught her eye. Second Route Logistics, Inc. Miranda frowned, flipping through the pages. "Who authorized this?" she began, but then stopped cold. Her eyes froze on the bottom of the document. The signature belonged to the regional head of Mercedes Commercial Partnerships, a man who only approved orders from elite clients or high-value ventures. Miranda looked up, stunned. "How? How did you get the signature?" she asked. Harold smiled faintly. "He was my student once," he said, "back when I taught mechanical logistics. I used to fix his trucks before he had a company to run." Silence spread through the showroom like a wave. The laughter from earlier now sounded cruel in hindsight. Julia lowered her gaze, guilt flashing in her eyes. Serena stepped forward hesitantly. "Mr. Brindley, I'm so sorry for how we—" He lifted a hand gently to stop her. "No need," he said quietly. "You were only doing what the world teaches, to see with your eyes, not your heart." No one spoke after that. Phones rang, documents were checked, calls made. And one by one, everything verified as true. Harold Brindley wasn't crazy. The payments had already been wired. He really was buying 5 trucks, but not for wealth, for something greater. By the time the paperwork cleared, the sun was dipping low, spilling gold across the glass showroom. Miranda found herself standing beside Harold near the delivery bay. She had spent years selling machines, but in that moment, she realized this man wasn't buying trucks. He was rebuilding lives. "You know," she said softly, "I judged you the moment you walked in. I saw your clothes, your hands, your bag, and I thought you were just another old man with a dream too big for reality." Harold turned, smiling with weary warmth. "Dreams don't shrink because people stop believing," he said. "They just wait for the right hands to build them again." He glanced at the trucks gleaming in the fading light. "These machines will feed families. They'll carry hope from one town to another. That's worth more than pride, don't you think?" Miranda nodded slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. "It is." The next morning dawned clear and golden. The sunlight spilled across the Mercedes truck yard, glinting off the newly delivered white rigs that stood in perfect alignment. Their polished chrome mirrored the sky, as if they too were eager to begin the journey ahead. For years, Harold Brindley had walked the long road alone. But today, he wasn't alone anymore. Standing beside the trucks was a group of men and women, people who, like Harold, had once been discarded by life. A few were war veterans whose eyes still carried the weight of battle. Others were single parents struggling to keep food on the table. One woman, a former mechanic who had been living out her car, stood trembling beside a gleaming cab, tears in her eyes as she traced her fingers over the door that now bore the words, Second Route Logistics. Miranda watched from the showroom window, her usual confidence softened into something quieter, respect, maybe even awe. She hadn't slept much the night before. Harold's words had echoed in her head. Dreams don't shrink because people stop believing. They just wait for the right hands to build them again. Now, seeing those hands at work, she understood what he meant. The engines roared to life one by one, a deep and steady sound that filled the air like a promise. Neighbors and onlookers began to gather along the street, drawn by the sight of something rare, hope rolling on 6 wheels. Harold stood near the front truck, adjusting the cap that had become his signature. He moved slowly, still stiff from years of hard labor, but his presence carried a quiet strength. He opened the driver's door, then paused to look back at the small crowd that had formed. A little boy sitting on his father's shoulders pointed at the trucks. "Daddy, who's that man?" he asked. His father smiled faintly. "Someone who remembered what the rest of us forgot," he said. Miranda stepped out onto the lot, her heels clicking softly against the concrete. "Mr. Brindley," she called. He turned, eyes warm beneath his worn cap. She hesitated for a moment before saying, "I wanted to thank you for reminding me that not every suit, not every sale, tells the whole story. Yesterday, I saw a poor man walk in. Today, I see a visionary driving away." Harold chuckled. "I'm just an old trucker who got tired of watching good people get left behind," he said. Then his tone grew thoughtful. You can't change the world in a day, Miranda, but you can change someone's world in a moment. Sometimes that's enough. She nodded slowly, blinking back unexpected emotion. The first truck began to move, rolling out of the gate and onto the open road. Behind it followed the others, one by one, each driven by someone who only days ago had no place to go. The sight was breathtaking, the line of white Mercedes rigs stretching into the distance like a caravan of new beginnings. The townsfolk clapped as the last truck turned the corner. Miranda watched until the sound of the engines faded completely, leaving behind only the echo of what had happened. Inside the showroom, Julia sat quietly at her desk, staring at the spot where Harold had stood just yesterday. "Do you think we'll ever see him again?" she asked. Miranda looked down at the polished marble floor and smiled. "Men like him don't disappear," she said softly. "They leave trails, not footprints." A week later, a small envelope arrived in the showroom's morning mail. There was no return address, only a faint scent of oil and dust clinging to the paper. Miranda opened it carefully. Inside was a handwritten note in neat, strong script. "To the team at Mercedes Atlantic, thank you for the laughter. It reminded me how far I've come. Maybe kindness doesn't begin with believing in others, but in giving them the chance to prove you wrong. Harold Brindley." A folded photo slipped from the envelope, a picture taken that very morning. It showed Harold standing beside his 5 trucks, surrounded by smiling men and women, the name Second Route Logistics shining proudly on each door. Miranda stared at it for a long time. Then she placed it in a small frame and set it on the reception desk where every visitor could see it. From that day on, she made it a rule no one who walked through those doors would ever be judged by appearance again. Months later, word spread across the trucking industry about a small startup changing lives across the state. Second Route Logistics became a name people spoke with pride. Veterans found work. Families rebuilt their homes. Towns that had once been forgotten found new lifelines through the roads Harold's trucks traveled. Reporters tried to find him, but Harold preferred to stay on the move. Those who met him described a quiet man with a weathered smile and the calm of someone who had seen too much and yet still believed in better days. Sometimes, late at night, Miranda would step outside the showroom and watch the highway lights in the distance, wondering where Harold was. And every time a white truck passed under the street lamp, she smiled, because she knew, somewhere on that endless road, Harold Brindley was still driving, not chasing wealth or fame, but something far greater. He was chasing purpose. And for those who knew his story, he had already won. If this story touched your heart, please share, and subscribe to NND Stories, where true stories remind us that compassion still has the power to change lives. Tell us in the comments. If you were in Miranda's place that day, would you have laughed or listened a little closer? Because sometimes the most extraordinary souls walk in wearing torn clothes and leave behind lessons that shine brighter than chrome.